What we're focused on is finding companies that have something we call DUE, D-U-E, which means disruptive, unique, and exclusive. And while every brand feels like they have that, they don't. But there are a few that do. And if you can find those brands, they can be highly successful. But Costco's very SKU conscious. So like a retailer might have 7,000 to 15,000 SKUs. Costco only has tops around 43 to 4,500. So when an item goes in, a new item goes in, someone else's item goes out. So Absolutely. It's, they don't add SKUs. Like a retailer can just cut you in and drop you in the Safeway. Costco doesn't work that way. So, and it's all about numbers. If you don't hit the numbers, you're out. Focuses most brands, if they've never sold to Costco before, are used to value at retail, which is what the consumer sees. Costco's focused on value at cost, which is the FOB price expressed in a per ounce compared to whoever is getting your lowest price. If it's the retailer, if you're selling directly, or if you're selling to the distributors.
So, hi viewers, good morning. We have with us Mr. Jeremy Smith today with us on the call. He is the founder and CEO of Launchpad. So, Launchpad is the only full-service business strategy, branding, and representation group, which is intensely focused on emerging food brands, highly specialized in Costco representation and strategy. So, after more than 3.5 decades in strategy, sales, branding, and marketing, Jeremy's senior management and graphic arts resume is a salute to the country's most iconic brands, which includes Think Apple, Chobani, Crave Jerky, and a few more. So prior to Launchpad, as co-founder of Level 1, his relationships with buyers, marketers, strategists, venture capital firms, and designers presents enviable connections in the food industry. The most important thing about Jeremy is that he was named to Forbes and Circle Up's 2017 top catalyst and deal makers, influencers in the consumer industry. So, Jeremy, it is an honor to have you on the session. And really appreciate that you came on this session today.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy that you guys asked me to come on.
Awesome. So, very few people dream of working with Costco, and you are one of the fortunate people who are working with Costco. So, if you can tell us about your journey, how you started with Costco and how did you start this company and now scaling it up?
Yeah, so I didn't really know that much about Costco other than my brother worked there back in 2006. And we started a firm called Level 1 Marketing, which was focused on emerging food brands. But back then, they weren't called emerging food brands. They were just brands that nobody heard of, like Chobani, Crave. Even though they're household names today, when we met them, they were, 4 to 6 employees. So they weren't big brands, but, it was the entrepreneur's dream. And so it was, I came from the advertising side and sales world. And my brother came from Costco, and, he asked me to jump on board with him and found a company called Level 1 Marketing. Mm-hmm. And we were very successful and sold that company in 2015. And we sold to a big conglomerate, and I didn't really enjoy working there. So I left in 2017 and started Launchpad, which the biggest difference between Launchpad and Level 1 is that we're smaller and that we work with more brands, even under $1 million in sales, if they have the right item. So what we're focused on is finding companies that have something we call DUE, D-U-E, which means disruptive, unique, and exclusive. And while every brand feels like they have that, they don't. but there are a few that do. And if you can find those brands, they can be highly successful, both outside of Costco at like a Whole Foods or Wegmans or Erewhon or Kroger's. And, those brands experience high growth very quickly, usually. So it's different now working without my brother. I really enjoyed working with him, but it's also a lot of fun working without him as well. And it's just a little bit different. My brother and I are very close. So he retired, and I'm going to do this for a few more years, and we'll see what happens. But it's exciting, but very challenging times because of the pandemic. So
Right. Awesome. So, I mean, this is really inspiring, and I mean, it has been a great journey until now, and wish you all the best for the journey in future as well. So, Jeremy, tell me one thing. I mean, people are so looking forward to working with Costco. So, I mean, what differentiates Costco from any other retail chain, and what's so unique about them that it attracts the brands?
What sets them apart is volume, and they have the ability to deliver on a level of volume that most other retailers do not. And so you really have to, when you're looking at going to Costco, you have to have your supply chain in order, because Costco is definitely not the most patient retailer. And if you're not ready, they'll just walk away from you. So if you're unable to adjust to it. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. What makes it really exciting, though, is that the orders can be quite large, but you also have to understand that some brands, even no matter how successful they are outside of Costco, when you're on the shelf at a Whole Foods, you might have to move 3 to 10 units a week. At a Costco, you've got to sell in pallet quantities. And some items like kale chips, for example, they're successful out in retail, but when you go to a Costco, generally, you have to upsize into a large pack. They're going to be on a large group of pallets, so you might have anywhere from 375 to 600 units on a pallet, and those have to turn every 14 to 21 days. So that means you have to sell around 1,500 to 2,500 a week, and kale chips just don't do that. And a lot of the alternate chips don't. And so you have to be honest with yourself. There's only about a 1 to 3% chance that you're going to make it at Costco. So it's not something that, while it does sound exciting, it can deliver a lot of volume. A lot of times the business is quite inconsistent, meaning that you might get a rotation here or there, which is what most brands get. And then it's really hard to crack the code to get in and be in there every day. Chobani and Crave and Pop Chips were brands that were able to do that. But even Pop Chips after a while faded. Crave held and Chobani held, but Pop Chips did not. So Pop Chips isn't in Costco anymore on a daily basis. And, sometimes certain brands take off and do really, really well for short periods of time. And then every once in a while you get a Chobani, which, never slows down.
Right. So I think that is also one of the reasons that hardly few brands make it to Costco, right?
Yeah, and Costco is very SKU conscious. So like a retailer might have 7,000 to 15,000 SKUs. Costco only has tops around 43 to 4,500. So when a new item goes in, someone else's item goes out. So absolutely. It's, they don't add SKUs. Like a retailer can just cut you in and drop you into the Safeway. Costco doesn't work that way. So, and it's all about numbers. If you don't hit the numbers, you're out.
Right. So we have, often heard that Costco firstly goes regional, and then based on the movement, it translates it to the nationwide representation. So of course, this could be advantageous for going brands to test the market first and then scale up. So I mean, what is your take on that? And if you can throw some light around it as to, is it a good strategy to start with?
It depends. When we look at a client, we want to know what where their distribution currently is. Mm-hmm. So generally, if you go into a region where you don't have a lot of distribution, your sales can be down to the negative as much as 30%. Mm-hmm. Versus when you go into a region that you have a lot of distribution in. So if, let's say, you're in the Costco Midwest region and you have 12% ACV, and you're doing really well there, that might be the place that you want to start. And as that business builds and you continue to grow outside of Costco, then you can expand into other regions. There's always exceptions to the rules where an item comes along and it just hits it out of the park with no distribution, but that's rare. People like talking about it, but it doesn't happen very often. So it's really important that you look at focusing on smart growth instead of just growth for the sake of growth, because Costco is not the most loyal retailer. They'll cancel any item no matter how successful you are at any time. And even Chobani was pulled out of Costco for a while because they wanted to test other yogurt items. So it was a brief period of time, but that just shows you how tough they are. And at Costco, the member is the most important client for Costco, not the vendor. So it's just really important that you understand those type of things, and that you understand Costco doesn't want to represent more than 20 to 25% of your business, because they don't want to read in the newspaper or in a magazine that they put somebody out of business because they canceled an item. And like what's happened, over the years with Walmart. And so they want you to manage your business smartly. They don't want to be a big percentage of it. But at the same time, when you have the right items that fit Costco really well, and you have this, either your own plant that or a co-packer that has the ability to scale, then it can be a good fit if the item is the right type of item for high growth at club. But a lot of brands sometimes want to go to Costco just to go to Costco to get sales numbers, and they don't do that well. And so you've got to constantly, evaluate whether or not you have an item or a series of items that have the longevity and can move at the speed of Costco.
So, I mean, based on your insights, I can understand that it is very tough to get at Costco, and at the same time to remain consistent there is also a challenge. So, I mean, how important is it for the brand to understand the thought process of the buyer? And I mean, what should the brand think more on the factual things, and how should we create, let's say, the authentic stories around it?
Yeah, so I have a different view than probably most companies have on the buyer relationship. I think the buyers know a lot about what goes on at Costco, but that doesn't mean that your brand will be successful or unsuccessful. Most of the buyers told us that Chobani would not be successful at Costco, and they felt that Faye was going to be the big winner in the Greek yogurt category, and they were wrong. And so, for a brand, it's really important to be able to hold to your values and tell your story and be able to communicate that to the buyer, so that the buyer understands the differences. Sometimes they're subtle, sometimes they're quite large, but you can't go, between your product and the competitive set. So you've got to be able to coherently explain that in a factual manner. Costco is more of an operational sale, while some of the other retailers you're going to build long-term relationships with them, and maybe you go skiing and go to lunch and spend time with them. Costco's the opposite. They're not allowed to go to lunch except in certain situations when they're on a plant tour, and then usually they pay for their own lunches and you pay for your lunch, and they're very strict about that. And I think it's created very good values at Costco, and they usually don't have the issues of somebody trying to buy off a buyer that some of the other retailers have. But you've got to be able to make sure that you understand how the Costco business can impact your company and the best way to approach it. And so you can go to a Costco directly on your own without a broker, or you can go with a broker who's a real expert on dealing with the buyers. Right. But again, the golden rule to always remember is the buyer is there to make sure they take care of their members. That's their most important consumer. And so they may not share the same values that you do or the same belief in your product. And it's, you got to be really, a lot of people want to go in and they go in and tell a incredible story about what they do. Some of it's true, some of it's not true. But with Costco, you have to really be careful with what you say, because the buyers are really good at holding the vendors accountable. Right.
Since since the members are top priority for them, so for them they can do anything. That's right.
Yeah, well, Costco's business model doesn't work without the members and Absolutely. The members paying the dues. So the membership fees are how Costco is able to offset the cost of only having a 14% markup. Right. So that's their most important thing. Renewals, they have the highest rate of renewal of almost any membership group in the world. And so they've got to make sure they take care of their consumer, and their consumer feels that it's worth paying the extra dollars that you have to pay. One of the advantages of going into a regular retailer is you can walk around the store and buy whatever the heck you want. But at Costco, you've got to buy this large pack. There's no mix and match. You just, and so that's kind of the penalty for the discount, is that you're going to buy usually the top flavor, but you may not, the brand may have 5 or 6 SKUs or more, but Costco's not going to carry that many SKUs from a single brand. Generally, it's just 1, maybe 2 SKUs.
Right. So based on that, Jeremy, if you can throw some light on the deciding factor on having Costco's own brand, whereas having the manufacturer's brand. So how do they take call based on that?
Well, some brands are not interested in creating a Kirkland Signature private label, which is Costco's house brand. Chobani wasn't when Costco approached them. They're all about their own brand, and I actually like that model. But for some brands that want to that are okay just getting volume and selling it's a very low margin. If you think the margins are low when you sell your branded product to Costco, wait until you do a private label, because Costco wants to cut out as many of the costs as possible. Right. And about 95% of the time you have to own your own plant, because Costco is not going to take your brand and make you a private label. They're going to go directly to your co-packer if they can, or another co-packer to do it, because in order for Costco to, hit their margins, and, generally a Kirkland Signature private label item will be 30 to 50% less than what the leading brand is. They've got to really cut out every margin they possibly can cut out. And so if they know if they go through a brand that uses a co-packer, that there's added cost for that brand. So they'll go directly to the co-packer if they can, or they'll find another source that owns their own plant and make a product that's similar. But, you know, I would say that they probably have more private label brand, Kirkland Signature items at Costco right now than they've ever had before. And they've been very successful with it. It's, you know, the members view it that it's as good a quality as the national brand. And usually it is. Sometimes it's not, but usually it is. And it's really hard to compete, because when Costco puts a item in there under Kirkland Signature, a lot of times the competing products that were in the category are taken out, and it's just a KS item there. So it can be a big business, but it is incredibly low margins, and it doesn't do anything for your brand. It's only you're only building Costco's brand, which for some companies, they're fine with that. But for other companies, it's a little bit more complicated, and then in a, you know, you could do it for a year, and then Costco finds somebody who does it for less, and they switch, and then you're out of that business. So so it's a very competitive, it's really brutal on the private label side. You know, the margins, you're going to be well below 10% on your margins. You're going to be in single digit in order to do a private label.
Yeah, of course. Great. Coming down to my next question, I mean, so how important is deciding on the pricing for the product, and how does that equation work for Costco?
So Costco focuses, most brands, if they've never sold to Costco before, are used to value at retail, which is what the consumer sees. Costco is focused on value at cost, which is the FOB price expressed in a per ounce compared to whoever is getting your lowest price. If it's the retailer, if you're selling directly, or if you're selling to the distributor. So if a distributor is you're selling to for $10, Costco wants to be at least 20% below the distributor. So that means that you would be selling for $8 in that case. So and part of how you get there is you're selling Costco a much larger pack. They're buying in truckload quantities, and so the volume is much larger than it would be going through your distributor. So it's Costco is pretty tough on their value at cost, because in the old days they used to do value at retail, and because Costco was only marking up 14%, it was really easy to get a great value for their members, because they would see a 50% value, because the usually a retailer is going to mark up anywhere from 15% to 60%, depending upon the category. And then they've got a distributor that's marking up anywhere from 10% to 30%. So if Costco is only marking up 14%, then the pricing is going to be looking good, but Costco might be paying more. So what Costco did was they analyzed that, and then they came up and said, we're not going to focus on the value at cost. I mean, the value at retail. If we have the right value at cost, then we'll automatically have the right value at retail. So generally, to get to a 20% value at cost, you're going to have somewhere between a 48% and a 55%, depending upon what your margins are, value at retail that the consumer sees. But you know, it's really important that brands understand that, because a younger brand that doesn't have the buying clout on ingredients and pull with their co-packer, because they're a much smaller business starting out, you're probably better off in most situations, not all, because there's always exceptions to the rule, waiting until your business is large enough so that you do have the ability to get substantial concessions from your co-packer or your ingredient supplier.
Right.
Because otherwise, it's really difficult to get to the margins.
So, I mean, from the brand's perspective, it is, of course, the volume is high, but the margins would always remain low, as you rightly mentioned, maybe a single digit as well.
Yeah, I mean, I had a buyer tell me one time that many years ago that at Costco, um, you're never going to become a millionaire off the business, but you're going to be making pennies off of it. And I don't know that you're going to be making pennies. You should be able to do a little bit better than that. But the buyer's correct. You're not going to have, a giant 50%, margin on that you might have out in retail
Right.
at Costco. But at the same time, you're going to you could possibly get tremendous savings overall in the big picture by adding the volume because, a Costco region with a good item, there's 8 US regions and if you get a good item, one region can do $5 to $6 million. So you multiply that times 8. If you're fortunate enough to get into all 8 regions, that's quite a business.
Right. Absolutely. Awesome. So, I mean, typically, if we look at the marketing budget, so typically, I mean, how much marketing budget will Costco expect from a brand in terms of, let's say, demos or displays or any other kind of marketing?
Yeah, so most people are pretty familiar with Costco's demos because they're famous worldwide and the members love them. And you always see videos on TV and stories in the newspapers about items and how excited the members are to get to taste them. One of the things Costco does is they allow you to build up to 10%, no more than that, of the demo budget into your cost of goods.
Okay.
And so, and Costco is willing to pay for that to be put into the cost. They can be used for demos, which to me, I think of all the programs Costco has, demos are the most effective. But there are other programs, there's end caps, there's couponing, and those dollars can be used for those programs as well. But I generally direct my clients to stay away from coupons and MVM programs and those type of things and offer the best price possible every day and build in a demo budget and do demos because I think that gives you the greatest growth at Costco. There are a certain amount of Costco members, and it is a high percentage, I believe. Costco doesn't disclose this, but that only buy items that are on coupon. Mm-hmm. And so you might go ahead and do a coupon and you're all excited because you just got a lot of sales, but then those members don't return and buy your product because they just shop on coupon. As to where with demos, it gets the whole family involved. And the incentive is they taste the product. It's something new. They really enjoy it. And then they become a loyal purchaser of the brand. And so I think that that's a better way to build your business than couponing. But some consumers, brands get hooked on the coupons. And so they're always discounting it. And then the members wait until the item goes on discount. And then they buy it then, and they don't buy it until they see the coupon.
Right. And of course, I mean, as you rightly mentioned, the kind of sampling or the demos which happen at Costco are famous worldwide. I mean, we are also here in India and we really enjoy it. And our friends and family, of course, tell us that the kind of products which they tasted there. And it's a lovely experience. I mean.
Yeah, it is. And, what's nice is that it's really, as you said, it's an experience. And, people don't line up to go into the supermarket, but they line up to wait for the doors to open at Costco. And, one of the things that's always hard, my kids are grown up now, so they're all adults and they have their own kids. But when you're pushing a cart in a supermarket and your kid starts crying, there's really not a lot you can do. But at Costco, you can go over to the demo table and get them a chicken nugget. And all of a sudden the kid's all excited. The parents got peace and quiet finally. And so it's and then here or there they'll stumble across a new product, but it gets people in the doors, it gets them excited. And most importantly, it gets them to walk the entire warehouse. And
Right.
that's really where all of a sudden a Costco member goes in thinking they're going to spend $100, and by the time they're done walking through the store, they're spending $500 or $1,000 because of all the things they've seen. And and it's a friendly experience.
Right.
The demo people get knocked a lot because they're not very talkative, some of them, but at the end of the day, it's still a pretty pleasant experience, and it gives you the opportunity to go in and wonder what you'll see on that day, because Costco does an excellent job with their demo program, much better than Sam's Clubs or BJ's. And it really enables consumers to feel like, there's something going on in that warehouse during the day, which, warehouses generally aren't that exciting unless they have the name Costco on it.
Right. Right. And I remember, it was, I think, just 1.5 or 2 months back, or I don't know, maybe 3 months back. So because during COVID, the demos were shut, right? And they just started I think 2 months or 3 months back only.
Yeah, they've come back. There's a possibility that they may slow down again because of the Delta variant, but
yeah.
I think there'll be some regions that'll be fine, and there'll be some regions that we're not. I don't have any inside information on anything changing right now, but I know they just started doing, getting ready to do some road shows again, but now they're backing off, and they're going to do what they call talking road shows, which really aren't as effective as a real road show where they're handing out, sampling. And then, so you can't hand out sampling when they're doing talking road shows. So, and that's all, dependent on how bad the variant gets in a particular part of the country. So hopefully we're not going to get to the point where we have to stop demos again, because demos are so important. And it also brings the Costco member wants to go into the buildings to sample new products. Right. And, the business is very different when Costco doesn't have the demo. So it's not as effective.
Right. Right. Awesome. So coming down to my last question for the session. So if you can give a quick tips for the brands who wish to get into Costco.
Yeah, I would say that you generally, any brand that wants to go to Costco, you have to seriously look at your supply chain first before you even talk to a broker. Do you have the ability to supply truckload orders? Can you get to the right pricing? Can you deliver on time and consistently? Those are things you need to think about. And then you need to think about your budget. So if you, let's just make up a number and say, if you were going to spend $1 million to launch at Costco in 3 or 4 regions, when you add up all the demos and everything else that it takes to get into Costco, would that be better spent over the next 12 months getting more retailers on board and building that business up versus going to Costco and seeing if you get, odds are you're going to get a rotation maybe, and then you're done. So you do one rotation, maybe they come back later in the year, maybe they come back the following year. So you've got to take all of those things into account before you make the decision that you want to hire a broker and go to Costco. But you generally want to be, because of the percentage of business rule of Costco not wanting to be more than 20 to 25% of your business, you really have to be at least tracking about $1 million to $2 million in sales. There's always exceptions to the rule, as I always say, but you want to be there. So by the time, if you have a successful rotation, that you're starting to push past 2 million. The real sweet spot is around 5 to 10 million is really the early stage. But I've had brands, because one of the unique things about Costco is that they'll let you go into 1 or 2 buildings. So you don't have to go into all the buildings. And then last thing I'll add is it's really important that you find the right broker for your business, if you're going to use a broker, that you find, everyone's going to tell you they got great relationships with the buyers. No one's going to be honest with you from a broker perspective and say, we've got a great relationship with Jerry and we have a terrible relationship with Sandy. So you just have to presume they have good relationships. But the key question to ask them is, how do they build brands at Costco? What is the average time it takes them to get an item in, which it's probably going to be around 12 to 15 months, because that's generally about how long it takes to get in. Sometimes it's faster, but generally that's about the average timeline. And then you want to know, what SKUs do they already have in Costco? How long have they been there? Because a lot of times people get items in there and they don't last very long. And sometimes it's the broker's fault, but a lot of times it's not the broker's fault. It's the item just didn't sell that well. So those are the questions you really want to ask. And you want a broker that cares about your profitability, because most brokers don't, because they're just working on commission. And, when they look at the business, all they care about is, getting the sale and generating commission for their company. And so, it's important you get someone that understands Costco, but also understands and is willing to go fight for you. Because my job's not to be the best friend with the buyer. My job is to take care of my client and protect my client and their values, even if it means having to tell the buyer that they're wrong or that we're not interested in selling at that price. So, but a lot of brokers don't want to do that because they're always worried about their relationship with Costco. Yeah. I'm not worried about that. If I do the right thing for my client, then I think that's more important than doing the right thing for Costco. On the other hand, you need to be a brand that believes in integrity and honesty, because while no one's going to admit they're deceitful, Costco is a very, very ethical company, very much like Whole Foods and Erewhon. And, you can't go into a meeting and bullshit them, although a lot of vendors try, because Costco will eventually figure it out, and then they'll look at you and they'll know that they can't trust what you say. So it's really important to be honest with Costco, and don't try and stretch the truth in your meeting. Don't get your salespeople all pumped up, because it's an operational sale. It's not a rah sale. Right.
Well said. And I mean, I'm just looking at your this virtual background, and this rocket tells me about. So if I can look at it this way, that I mean, the kind of responses which you have given are so much bang on, and the brand has to be prepared, I mean, thoroughly. And that's when this Launchpad rocket would really take off for the brands who wish to be there at Costco. Because let's say people don't really sit in the rocket in the first place. First, they have to take a couple of flights, and then only they can really onboard this Launchpad rocket.
Thank you. I've never heard it quite explained that way. Thank you.